WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Okay, so the other day I put up a tutorial on how to trigger CSS animations when you're within a certain part of the viewport. I've been playing with that a little bit and wanted to demonstrate the usage of it. It's actually, I'm finding, becoming very, very useful. Where you're getting GSAP-like triggering of animations without actually having to load GSAP or Waypoints or anything like that. So here's an example of just some rough sort of stuff that I've done. So I've got some buffer text here. And as I scroll here, look down the bottom, I've got actually just below these headings here, I've got a text box on each of those. One of them you'll watch, it'll slowly or slightly rotate in from the right, and the other one will rotate from the left. And it's once we get that text box within 20% from the bottom of the viewport, or it also triggers as it leaves from 20% from the top. So basically between 20% from the top and 20% from the bottom, it's considered to be in the view, and it's going to be in its animation in state. Outside of that 20% from the top and the bottom, it's considered to be out of view and it'll animate out of its state. So let's just look at that now. So there it is there. So we got rotate left and rotate right and rotate left headings that came in. If I leave the 20%, they rotate out, come back in, they rotate in. So pretty cool so far. And this is with using one small JavaScript library, which is actually going to use native the JavaScript APIs and using standard CSS. So there is a bit of CSS. This, I think, it gives you a hell of a lot more control over than using the Elementor entry effects, but you do need to use CSS for this to work. All right, so let's go to the next one. So this example here, basically using the same animations, but I've used a attribute in Elementor's advanced settings, custom attributes, to make the in time longer. I think I made it 3 seconds. And with the one on the right, it waits for 0.5 seconds before it starts. So if I scroll down, you see this one's taking 3 seconds to come in, and the right-hand side took about 0.5 seconds, or exactly 0.5 seconds before it started. So go back out again, watch the right, delay, and then it starts. Delay, and then it starts. But it's coming in about half a second. Whereas on the left, it's taking 3 seconds to come in. I've used exactly the same method, same classes I did on these two, but I've just set a couple of attributes which change the behavior. So I'll work through all that with you. Next one down is a zoom. So what I'm tracking here is a icon widget within a column. So the column is basically set to overflow hidden. I've got a widget icon in the column, and I've set it to absolute positioning and basically centered that icon. And then I'm tracking the icon when it's moving within 20% of the viewport. And what I'm doing is I'm telling it to scale in that icon by 30 on the left-hand side is my standard and default. On the right-hand side, I'm just using a different icon, and I've set the amount of zoom to only 10, which is using the attributes. All right, so let's go to the reveal clip. So we've got a reveal clip left and a reveal clip right. Apart from the classes for the animation, the only real difference is the right-hand side one has a 0.5 second delay before it starts and a 300 millisecond in time. I think the left-hand one by default is 1 second. So watch those. So left one comes in, and over 1 second we can see the reveal come in. The right one comes in, and there's a 5.5 second delay, and then it takes 300 milliseconds to complete. And that's just by changing some attributes. So that's our reveal. Like if we go up the top of the screen here, we can see it plays the out animation or the exit animation because it's outside of 20% of the viewport. Now, this doesn't have all of the finesse that you have with the GSAP Scrolltrigger, where you can change a lot of properties of how it tracks. You can set scrubbing. You can tell it whether to trigger on the top or the bottom of an element. It doesn't have all that, but I think this works well enough for generally what we want to do within a web page. And I'll show you exactly how that works. Then we've got a custom one here. So what I'm tracking here is I've got an intersection inside a column, and I'm tracking when that any part of that intersection is within 20% of the viewport. And I'm animating the icon, the drop shadow at the back here, and the opacity of this text box. So as I go out, the text, I'm not sure you can see it from there. So the text box, the opacity down here is low. It's at 0.1 actually. The icon is pointing left, and we've only got a very, very slight box shadow. As soon as we move within the viewport, 20% of it, everything animates. The drop shadow, the icon, and the opacity of that. Once we get outside of 20%, it goes back to its default state. Okay, and we can change where these trigger. So I'm going to go through and explain all this. I think this is amazing, and I think that this is going to be my go-to for how I handle these viewport animations. In my previous video, I talked about this JavaScript here. I've actually started using this WP code box, which is great because I can push stuff up to the cloud and just put it down as I need. All this code I went through in that previous tutorial, so I'm not going to go through all this code here. What I'm going to say is that any element that I add this WPG reanimate on can be anything. A section, column, widget, container, whatever you add that to, it's going to track that. And by default, if it is 20% from the top or 20% from the bottom, if any part of that element we're tracking is within that range, it's going to add the InView class to it. If it's outside of that range, it removes the InView class from it. And that's what we're using to trigger the animation. That's pretty straightforward. So this is our default, 20% from the top, 20% from the bottom. So going back here, so once I get to 20% from the top, it's out. I'm back 20% from the top and it's animated in. Once I get down to 20% from the bottom, it animates out again. And that's just by adding that single class in view and then setting up some CSS to do that. So what I've done is I've created some standard CSS. You would do your own for these, but this is just what I've started with. So the first thing I've got to do is in the editor, for example, this, go back to the editor here, for this text box here, my default state for that is that it's scaled down and the opacity is set to 0 and it's rotated slightly to the left. So it's going to rotate into the right as it increases the scale and increases the opacity. So in the editor, we don't want to look like it's starting state. We want it to look like it's just a default state. So what we're doing here is we're saying when the editor is active, so body.elementor editor active means when you're in the editor, for this class, set our opacity to 1 and our scale to 1. Then we can see it in here and we can edit it. Okay, when we're not in the editor, this rule here is going to take effect, which is going to transform the scale from the scale start, rotate from the rotate start, and the opacity from the opacity start, which are set in these variables up here. So we're starting from opacity of 0, rotation to -8 degrees, and what are we doing? A scale of 0.5. So if we did not have this rule here in the editor, we wouldn't be able to see this because the opacity is 0. So that's the reason we do that. All right, now all of the stuff I can think of that I might want to change, I set as variables on the class so that I can override those, which I'll show you a little bit later. I can override those using attributes. So what we're doing here is we're setting our default state, so with all our starting properties and our transition. I've just got ease for the opacity and transform over the transition out. So our out state is returning back to not our final view or our animated view. Over the animation timing, which is our function. So ease out, ease power, whatever you want to use for that. It could be a cubic Bezier curve, whatever you want. All right, so that's our default state that we wanted to return back to. When we've got the in view, which that JavaScript is doing, we want to transform the scale back to 1, 0 degrees, opacity to be the end opacity. So we're going, our end opacity is 1, So, and we're going to transition the opacity over the opacity duration. We've got that as 0.5 to start with. Yep. And ease, and we're going to use a delay here, so I can actually delay the start of this animation. So we can have two elements on the page with the same settings, and we can have a delay on one of them so it starts a little bit later than the other. And then we're going to transform, same sort of thing, where we've got our how long do we want to transform in for, what timing function are we going to use, and what's the delay before it starts. And that's all set through these variables here, which we can override. All right. So then the rotate right is exactly the same sort of thing, except for what I've done instead of -8 degrees, I've done 8 degrees. You can clean this up a lot by combining all the things. I've done this for easy demonstration. So what's going to happen with this one here is it's going to start from a -8 degree rotation with a scale of 0.5 and an opacity of 0. And then it's going to end up with a rotation of 0, scale of 1, and an opacity of 1. So rotating in, and the other one is just opposite to that. All right, so the other one I'll quickly look at is the big zoom in. Again, variables on the class, inside the editor, make the opacity 1 and the scale 1. Okay, big zoom in, but default state is our scale variable start, opacity start. So what do we got that? Scale start is 0.1. The opacity start is 0. And then we've got the transitions, exactly the same as we did above. When it's in the view, scale to the end scale, opacity end, over the opacity duration with the delay, and again, exactly the same thing with the transitions. So that's exactly the same thinking, which is what I like to do. I like to standardize this sort of stuff so it's easy for you to understand when you come back to it. The other thing I mentioned here, I've made these very specific. You can actually take this class out here and it will still work because it's still on the same element, getting the in view class added. I like to make it more specific, so I just leave the WG reanimate in there because that's what we use to select it. All right, so that's the big scale in. And in the clip reveal, exactly the same sort of thinking, except for we're using a clip path for the transition. Okay, so that's, I'm not going to go through every one of these because they're all doing exactly the same thing with just different properties. And by the way, you don't have to use transitions. You can use keyframe animation. So in view, call a keyframe animation, and that would work just as well. So if you wanted it to move in different ways, like you would with GSAP, so maybe it zooms in and then moves to the left a little bit over timing. You'd create a keyframe animation and call that once the in view class is being added. All right, so that's how it works. Coming back to these here. So with the standard, if you just want the standard animation, all you have to do is add the WPG-reanimate and the class name that you defined over here. That's all you have to do. If you want it to do that and then be animating and staying in within 20% from the top and the bottom, you have to do nothing else here. All right, so let's have a look at this with the long, rotating with a long in time. If I look at the, oh dear, did it again. Basically just touching, maybe I got a mouse problem. Okay, so just click on that to select it. So again, same classes as the one above it. The only difference is in the attributes, I've added style, pipe, transform duration in is 3 seconds. And you've got to use the CSS milliseconds, seconds, etc. here. So I'm saying that's 3 seconds. So my transform duration in for this is here. And then what I'm doing is when it's in view, it's using that transform duration there. which is why it's taking 3 seconds. So simply overriding these variables using the style attribute is all you need to do. So if we look at the next one over here, all we've done on that is style a delay variable, setting that to 0.5 seconds. All right. I could then also, let's say, actually, let's do this as an experiment. If I added an extra, so I went 0.5 seconds, and then I wanted the maybe I wanted to rotate more. This is on the rotate left, is it? Yes. So if I put rotate, and I made that, this is going to be crazy, but if I made that, say, 90 degrees, and let's see what that does. So I'm going to look at this, this one on the right here. Fresh. Wrong one. Standard settings. Watch the one on the right-hand side. Huge rotation. And just by changing those attributes here, we can change, let's make that 360. See if it actually does a full spin. There we go. As we set it to 360, it's going to do a full spin as it comes in. So it's pretty cool that you can just change these attributes here and completely change the way that the CSS animation actually works once you've set them up properly. Big zoom in. I already showed what I was doing with that. So I think this icon we're tracking, all I'm doing on that is my classes, big zoom in, and on my other icon over here, big zoom in, and then in my attributes, so I'm telling it to set the scale in to 10. That's all I'm doing on that. Reveal clip to right. I'm actually going to show you something here where it's actually pretty cool. If you do your CSS correctly, you can actually combine these. So if we add VPA rotate fade in, left fade in, if I grab that and I go to this clip reveal here, you can see I've got my reanimate and the reveal clip to left. I'm going to add this extra class here and see what that does. So we're only looking at the left hand side one here. Okay, let's see, where's our reveal? There we go. See now, our reveal is doing both the rotate in and it's also doing the clip path in. All right, so as long as you write your CSS properly, you can actually combine those to give a better effect. All right, so just working through this as I talk. So the next one is this one here, where I'm tracking the inner heading, sorry, the intersection, and we're just doing custom CSS on that. I'll show you another really cool thing with this, which is about controlling where this animates. So you can do this on any element. So at the moment, this animates when it gets to any part of this element, gets within 20% of the bottom, or it animates out when it's within 20%, when it's outside of 20% of the top. Let's say we only want that to animate within a box sort of in the middle of the screen. So we want it to be 40% from the top, 40% from the bottom. So we've only got a 20% window in the middle that we want that to animate. How we would do that is, this is actually the previous video as well. So in the attributes, I add data, IO for IntersectionObserver, top, minus, whoops, got to be a pipe, not a colon. Top minus 40%. Do data, IO bottom, pipe minus 40%. So we're saying a window of 40% from the top, 40% from the bottom. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so we can see now, as I scroll down, it hasn't animated yet. Still not animating, still not animating. Now the bottom of this element has got within that 20% of the center of the window. So after the 40% down, let's have a look here when the top of this leaves that window. So the top here has left that window of 20% in the middle of the screen, so it animates out. So you can decide how and where that's going to animate on the scroll just by changing the top and bottom of that. Again, it's got to be minus. The way the IntersectionObserver works, we've got to look at the top and bottom. We've got to say where we want by saying it's minus 40 from the top, minus 40 from the bottom, etc. Let's say we want it to animate right at 40% from the top, but we want it to stay in all the way down to the bottom. You set the data IO bottom to 0%. Okay, so from the top, gets to 40% animated in. So the bottom of this got to 40% of the window, and it's going to stay in, stay in, stay in until we get past the bottom. It's animated out. All right, then we come in, animate straight in, animate straight in. All right, we get to the bottom being 40% above the center of the screen, and it animates out. So you can control quite a bit of where these elements animate, and it's controlled on each individual element. So the other ones here, see the one above it, that's still within 20% of the top of the screen. All right? The next one above it is still within 20% of the top of the screen. 20% of the bottom of the screen. But our custom one we've just done here is within 40% of the top of the screen and then stays in all the way down. So that's pretty much it. I think it's a really cool way of doing it. I've already put up a tutorial where you've got this JavaScript and you can put that wherever you want to put it. I've got it in WP Codebox and enabled for the site. You can stick it into your child theme, you can stick it into Elementor custom code or any other editor that you use or code manager you use. It's entirely up to you. I will make these the CSS available as a link in this tutorial so you can give you a bit of a starting point, but it's up to you how you implement this. I hope that's something that you find useful, and I'd love to see what you do with it. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe. Please like this video so I know what kind of things that you like and you want me to do more of. So thank you.